There's this strange moment that arrives without warning. You're going about your day, maybe scrolling through your phone or sitting in silence, and suddenly you feel it. That pull toward him, the one that used to make your chest ache with longing, the one that used to consume your every thought, it's still there. But now it feels different. Now it feels heavy, irritating even. You notice yourself thinking about him, and instead of softening, instead of melting into that familiar warmth, you feel your jaw tighten, your shoulders tense. Something inside you recoils, not because the love is gone, but because something else has arrived. Something that feels like rejection but isn't. Something that feels like anger but runs deeper. It's the part of you that finally woke up and looked around and said, "Wait, why am I still here? Why am I still holding this? Why does this hurt so much when it's supposed to be divine?" You feel it, don't you? That strange cocktail of love and resistance. That confusing blend of soul recognition and absolute exhaustion. You still know he's your twin flame. You still feel the connection humming beneath everything. But now when you think of him, when you feel his energy, when you remember the way he ran or the way he avoided, or the way he chose fear over you again and again, something in you doesn't just hurt anymore. It revolts, and you wonder if that makes you a bad person. If that means the journey is over. If that means you've failed some cosmic test. But what if I told you this moment, this dislike, this resistance, this strange new boundary your soul is drawing? What if this is not the end? What if this is the exact frequency that calls him home? If you felt this shift, this strange new energy toward your twin flame masculine, I want you to know you're not broken, you're becoming. Drop a comment below and share where you are in your journey right now, or simply type, "I choose myself first," to claim this energy. And if these messages land in your soul like truth you've always known, subscribe so you never miss the transmissions that are meant for you. Let's talk about what's really happening here. Because this dislike, this resistance, this new energy you're feeling toward the masculine, it's not what you think it is. It's not you becoming cold. It's not you losing faith. It's not the connection dying. It's you finally stepping into the frequency that makes union possible. For so long, you've been operating from a place of unconditional acceptance. You've been holding space for his fear, his running, his silence, his confusion. You've been the one who stayed, the one who believed, the one who saw his soul even when his actions showed you his wounds. And that was beautiful. That was necessary. That was part of your journey. But there comes a stage, and you're in it now, where unconditional love must meet conditional presence, where soul recognition must meet self-respect, where divine connection must meet human boundaries. This is the stage where the feminine stops being the eternal waitress at the table of his potential and becomes the woman who only sits at tables where she is actually fed. And that shift, beloved, that shift changes everything. Because for the first time, you're not looking at him through the lens of who he could be. You're looking at him through the lens of who he is choosing to be right now. And the gap between those two versions, that gap is what you're feeling as dislike. It's not him you dislike, it's the gap. It's the waiting in the gap. It's the excusing of the gap. It's the romanticizing of the gap. Your soul is done living in potential. Your soul wants presence. Have you noticed how exhausting it became, holding the vision for both of you? believing for both of you, healing for both of you. You became the spiritual pack mule of the connection, carrying his fear and your hope, his resistance and your faith, his running and your staying. And somewhere along the way, you forgot that a twin flame connection is supposed to be a mirror, not a martyr mission. You forgot that union is two wholes meeting, not one whole person trying to complete someone who refuses to do their own work. And now your body is rejecting that old dynamic. Your nervous system is saying no. Your energy field is saying, I will not participate in this version anymore. This is not you being difficult. This is you being awake. Let's go deeper into what this resistance really is. Because on the surface, it feels like you're pulling away from him. But what's actually happening is you're pulling away from the version of love that required you to abandon yourself. You're pulling away from the story that said your worth was tied to his awakening. You're pulling away from the belief that if you just loved him hard enough, purely enough, patiently enough, he would finally choose you. But here's the truth that's breaking open inside you right now. He was never supposed to choose you. He was supposed to choose himself, and you were never supposed to wait for that choice. You were supposed to make your own. This dislike you feel, it's your soul's immune system activating. It's recognizing the old frequency as a virus, as something that doesn't belong in your field anymore. Every time you think of him and feel that resistance, that's your inner knowing saying, this version of him cannot come with us where we're going. This version of the dynamic cannot exist in the reality we're building. He must rise or he must release, but he cannot keep us small. And that knowing, that boundary, that sacred no, it's not cruelty, it's clarity. It's not rejection, it's recalibration. It's not you being less spiritual, it's you being more sovereign. Have you ever noticed how the spiritual community talks about twin flames? It's all about unconditional love, divine timing, soul contracts, mirroring, healing. And all of that is true. But what they don't tell you enough is that unconditional love does not mean unconditional tolerance. That divine timing does not mean infinite waiting. That soul contracts include exit clauses when one party refuses to honor the agreement. That mirroring is supposed to inspire growth, not excuse stagnation. You've been fed a narrative that said the feminine's role is to hold space, to be patient, to trust the process, to love him through his fear. And yes, there is a season for that. But there is also a season for the feminine to say, I have held space. Now I'm taking up space. I have been patient. Now I'm being present to myself. I have trusted the process. Now I'm trusting my boundaries. I have loved you through your fear. Now I'm loving myself through my truth. This is that season. This is the stage where the divine feminine stops performing her role in the old script and starts writing a new one. A script where her peace matters more than his comfort, where her alignment matters more than his avoidance, where her wholeness matters more than his potential. And when she steps into that script, when she embodies that frequency, the entire dynamic shifts. Because the masculine has been operating in a paradigm where your love was guaranteed, where your presence was constant, where your energy was available no matter how he showed up or didn't show up. He's been living in the safety net of your unconditional acceptance. And that safety net, as beautiful as it was, became his excuse not to jump. But now the net is dissolving. Not because you're removing your love, but because you're removing your willingness to catch someone who refuses to learn to fly. And that dissolution, that's what he's feeling right now, even if he doesn't understand it yet. He's feeling the shift in your energy. He's feeling the absence of your chase. He's feeling the space where your hope used to live. And it's terrifying him in ways he can't articulate. Because for the first time, he's realizing that the connection isn't just about whether he's ready. It's about whether you're still available. And beloved, you're not. Not for the version of him that runs. Not for the version of him that hides. Not for the version of him that chooses fear over and over while expecting you to choose faith. Let's talk about what this looks like in your actual experience. You might notice that when his name comes up, you don't get that flutter anymore. You get a sigh, a heaviness, an eye roll even. You might notice that the things you used to find mysterious about him now just seem immature. The silence you once interpreted as depth now feels like avoidance. The distance you once romanticized as necessary space now feels like emotional laziness. You might notice that you're no longer checking your phone hoping he reached out. You're checking your phone hoping he didn't, because you don't want to deal with the crumbs, the breadcrumbs, the vague messages that say everything and nothing, the energy that pulls you in just enough to keep you hooked, but never enough to actually build something real. You might notice that you've stopped defending him in your mind. You used to have these internal conversations where you'd explain his behavior to yourself. He's just scared. He's been hurt before. He's doing his best. He'll come around when the timing is right. But now those explanations feel hollow. Now you're thinking, okay, but when does his fear stop being my responsibility? When does his past stop being my excuse to accept less? When does his best actually become good enough? And those questions, beloved, those questions are not you being harsh. Those questions are you being honest. Finally, brutally, sacredly honest. And here's where it gets really interesting. Because this dislike, this resistance, this new frequency you're embodying, it's doing something to him that your unconditional love never could. It's waking him up. Not because you're trying to wake him up. Not because you're playing games or using strategy or withholding love to manipulate a response. But because your energy has shifted so fundamentally that he can no longer rest in the old dynamic. He can no longer take your presence for granted. He can no longer assume that his soul connection with you is enough to keep you tethered while he figures his life out. The masculine, especially the twin flame masculine, has been conditioned his entire life to associate love with pursuit. He's been taught that if a woman really loves him, she'll wait. She'll understand. She'll be patient. She'll see past his flaws and love him anyway. And in the beginning of the twin flame journey, you did all of that. You waited, you understood, you were patient. You saw past everything. But what he didn't realize, what his conditioning didn't prepare him for, is that there's a difference between a woman who loves unconditionally and a woman who loves unconsciously. Unconscious love says, I will accept anything because I'm afraid to lose you. Conscious love says, I will accept only what honors both of us because I'm no longer afraid of losing anything, including you. You've moved from unconscious love to conscious love. And that movement is what he's feeling as a threat, because now he has to show up differently. Now he has to meet you at a different level. Now he has to actually do the work he's been avoiding, not because you're demanding it, but because the frequency you're holding demands it. Your energy is no longer a soft place for his fear to land. Your energy is now a mirror, forcing him to look at what he's been running from. And mirrors, beloved, mirrors are uncomfortable. Mirrors show us everything we've been trying to avoid. Mirrors reveal the gap between who we are and who we're pretending to be. And the twin flame masculine, when he looks into the mirror of your new frequency, he sees himself clearly for the first time. He sees his avoidance, his fear, his immaturity, his refusal to step up. And he sees that the woman he thought would wait forever is no longer waiting. She's living. And that realization cracks something open in him. Let me tell you what's happening in his inner world right now, even if he's not showing it. He's panicking, not in an obvious way, not in a way that looks like panic from the outside. But internally, there's a scramble happening, because he's starting to realize that he might actually lose you. Not lose the connection. He knows the connection is eternal, but lose access to you. Lose the privilege of your energy. Lose the possibility of union in this lifetime. And that possibility, that real, tangible possibility of loss, is doing what your patience never could. It's forcing him to confront himself. He's starting to ask questions he's never asked before. Why do I keep running? What am I actually afraid of? Why does the idea of losing her hurt more than the idea of facing my fear? What is this resistance really about? And these questions, they're not comfortable. They're not easy. They're tearing apart the walls he's built around his heart. They're dismantling the stories he's told himself about why he can't do this, why it's not the right time, why he needs more space. Because now he's realizing that all of those stories were just fear dressed up as logic. And fear loses its power when it's named. But here's the part that might be hard to hear. His awakening, his transformation, his rising, none of that is your responsibility. You are not the one who has to guide him through it. You are not the one who has to hold his hand while he faces his demons. You are not the one who has to sacrifice your peace to make sure he finds his. That's his journey. And the moment you truly understand that, the moment you truly embody that, is the moment you step into your full power as the divine feminine. Because the divine feminine is not a healer of men. She is a frequency that invites healing. She is not a savior of souls. She is a mirror that reflects truth. She is not a waitress at the table of potential. She is a queen at the table of presence. And queens do not beg. Queens do not chase. Queens do not shrink themselves to make others comfortable. Queens simply are, and in their being, everything around them must rise or fall away. This is where you are now, in your queen frequency, in your sovereign frequency, in your I am the prize, and if you cannot see that, then you are not ready for me frequency. And that frequency, beloved, that frequency is magnetic in a way that neediness never was. Because neediness says, I need you to complete me. But sovereignty says, I am already complete, and I'm only interested in someone who is also doing the work to become whole. Neediness repels the masculine because it puts pressure on him to be something he's not ready to be. But sovereignty attracts the masculine because it challenges him to become who he's always known he could be. Have you noticed that the more you step into your own power, the more you feel him energetically? It's like the less you chase him in the physical, the more he chases you in the energetic. You might notice an increase in dreams about him, sudden thoughts of him that feel like they're coming from outside of you, synchronicities that seem to be screaming his name, signs that feel like the universe is saying, he's thinking about you, he's feeling you, he's finally waking up. And all of that is true. He is thinking about you. He is feeling you. He is waking up, but not because you're doing anything to make that happen, because you stopped doing anything to make that happen. You stopped trying to force the connection. You stopped trying to manage his journey. You stopped trying to be the bridge between his fear and his soul. And in that stopping, in that sacred release, the natural flow of the connection was restored. Because here's what most people don't understand about twin flame dynamics. The connection doesn't need your effort to exist. The connection exists beyond effort. It exists beyond time. It exists beyond the physical realm. What needs your effort is the distortion, the imbalance, the chasing and running, the codependency disguised as cosmic love. That's what requires constant energy to maintain. But the moment you stop feeding the distortion, the moment you stop participating in the imbalance, the connection returns to its natural state. And its natural state is magnetic, effortless, reciprocal, whole. This is why your dislike, your resistance, your new boundaries, they're not obstacles to union. They're the pathway to union. Because union cannot happen in the old frequency. Union cannot happen when one person is chasing and the other is running. Union cannot happen when one person is whole and the other is hiding. Union can only happen when both people are standing in their truth, owning their power, and choosing the connection from a place of wholeness rather than woundedness. And right now, you're doing your part. You're standing in your truth, you're owning your power, you're choosing yourself. And in that choice, you're creating the space for him to do the same. But let's be really clear about something. There is no guarantee that he will do the work. There is no guarantee that he will rise. There is no guarantee that union will happen in this lifetime. And that's okay. Because your journey is not dependent on his choices. Your wholeness is not dependent on his awakening. Your worth is not dependent on whether he finally sees what he's been running from. You are already whole. You are already worthy. You are already complete. And whether he joins you in that frequency or not, you will be okay. Better than okay. You will be free. This is the ultimate lesson of the twin flame journey. It's not about getting the other person to change so you can finally be happy. It's about changing yourself so completely that you realize your happiness was never dependent on them in the first place. It's about becoming so whole within yourself that union becomes a celebration rather than a completion. It's about rising to a frequency where you're no longer looking for someone to save you, but rather someone to dance with in the fullness of who you both are. And if he can't meet you there, if he's not willing to do the work to meet you there, then he's not your union partner in this lifetime. He's your catalyst, your teacher, your mirror, and that's still sacred. That's still valuable. That's still exactly what your soul needed. But union, real union, the kind of union that doesn't just feel good, but actually is good, That requires two people who are both willing to face themselves, heal themselves, and show up for each other from a place of overflow rather than need. And right now, you're ready for that. You've done the work, you've faced yourself, you've healed the parts of you that were seeking validation outside of yourself. You've reclaimed your power, you've remembered your worth, you are ready. And now the question is not whether you're ready. The question is whether he's willing to become ready. Whether he's willing to stop running from the very thing his soul has been seeking. Whether he's willing to face the fear that's been keeping him small. Whether he's willing to rise into the man he's always known he could be. And here's the beautiful, terrifying, liberating truth. You don't get to control his answer to that question. You don't get to force his awakening. You don't get to manipulate his timeline. All you get to do is hold your frequency and let the universe do the rest. All you get to do is stay in your truth and trust that whatever is meant to unfold will unfold. All you get to do is love yourself so completely that his choice becomes irrelevant to your peace. And that, beloved, that is freedom. That is sovereignty. That is the divine feminine fully embodied. So what does this mean for you moving forward? It means you stop checking for signs that he's changing. You stop analyzing every little synchronicity to see if it means he's coming back. You stop putting your life on hold, waiting for him to get his together. You start living, fully, unapologetically, radiantly living. You start pursuing your passions. You start building the life you want. You start opening yourself to experiences and people and opportunities that light you up, not to make him jealous, not to trigger him into action, but because you deserve to live a full life regardless of what he's doing or not doing. And here's what will happen when you do that. One of two things. Either he will rise to meet you, transformed and ready, showing up in a way that honors the connection and honors you. Or he won't. And if he doesn't, you'll realize that you're already so full, so whole, so complete, that his absence doesn't create a void. It just creates space for something or someone who is ready to meet you where you are. Either way, you win. Because you're no longer waiting for external validation to give yourself permission to be happy. You're creating your own happiness. You're building your own heaven. You're becoming your own home. This is the final stage, beloved. This is the culmination of everything you've been moving through, everything you've been learning, everything you've been becoming. This is where the divine feminine stops being the supporting character in the masculine's awakening story and becomes the main character in her own ascension story. This is where she steps out of the shadows of his journey and into the brilliant light of her own. This is where she recognizes that she has been writing herself into the margins of his narrative, shrinking her own epic tale to fit into the footnotes of his transformation. But no more. This is where she reclaims the pen. This is where she remembers that her story is not a subplot, it is the main event. Her awakening is not secondary, it is primary. Her evolution is not dependent on his readiness, it is sovereign in its own right. This is where she stops waiting for union and starts embodying it within herself. She stops looking outside for the completion she's been taught to seek and starts discovering the wholeness that has always resided within her own being. She stops scanning the horizon for his return and starts exploring the infinite landscape of her own soul. This is where she stops looking for her other half and starts realizing she was never divided in the first place. She starts understanding that the concept of being half of anything was a lie, a distortion, a misunderstanding of what sacred union truly means. She begins to see that she was always whole, always complete, always enough. The twin flame journey was never about finding someone to complete her. It was about remembering that she was never incomplete. It was about unlearning the conditioning that told her she needed someone else to be whole, and relearning the truth that wholeness is her natural state. And in that realization, in that embodiment, in that frequency, union becomes inevitable. Not because she's trying to make it happen, not because she's manifesting or affirming or visualizing or doing all the things she's been told to do, but because she's become the frequency that union exists in. She has alchemized herself into the very vibration of sacred union. She's become the magnet, not by chasing or pursuing or trying to attract, but by becoming so fully herself that she naturally draws everything that matches her frequency. She's become the portal, the gateway through which divine love flows into the physical realm. She's become the temple, the sacred space where heaven and earth meet, where the human and the divine merge, where the masculine and feminine dance in perfect harmony within her own being. And the masculine, if he's truly her divine counterpart, will have no choice but to be drawn to that temple. Not to take from it, not to extract its energy, or consume its light or drain its power, but to worship in it, to honor the sacred space she has created within herself, and to approach it with reverence and respect. Not to consume it, not to possess it or control it or diminish it, but to honor it, to recognize its sacredness, and to treat it with the care and devotion it deserves. Not to complete it, because he finally understands that it was never incomplete, but to celebrate it, to witness its magnificence, to stand in awe of its beauty, and to add his own wholeness to hers in a union of two complete beings, choosing to share their completeness with each other. Your dislike of his current energy is not a problem to fix. It's not something you need to overcome or transcend or spiritually bypass. It's not a sign that you're not evolved enough, or that you're stuck in ego, or that you're not holding the unconditional love you think you should be holding. It's a frequency to honor. It's your soul's wisdom speaking to you in the language of discernment. It's your inner knowing refusing to be silenced by spiritual platitudes or twin flame teachings that ask you to accept less than you deserve. It's your soul saying, I see the gap between who you are and who you're meant to be, and I will no longer pretend that gap doesn't exist. I see the distance between the potential I know you carry and the reality you're currently showing me. And I will no longer gaslight myself into believing that distance is acceptable. I will no longer make myself small to make that gap comfortable. I will no longer dim my light to make his darkness feel less dark. I will no longer shrink my truth to make his illusions feel more real. I will no longer compromise my standards to make his lack of growth feel less painful. I will hold the vision of your highest self, but I will not sacrifice my peace waiting for you to step into it. I will believe in who you can become, but I will not destroy myself in the waiting. I will see your potential, but I will not abandon my present for your possibility. I will honor the divine masculine that lives within you, but I will not tolerate the wounded masculine that currently controls you. And that stance, that sacred boundary, that divine dislike of anything less than truth, that is what calls him home, not your patience, though you have been patient beyond measure. Not your understanding, though you have understood him in ways no one else ever has. Not your unconditional tolerance, though you have tolerated behaviors and patterns that would have sent anyone else running, but your unwavering commitment to your own alignment, your refusal to betray yourself one more time, your decision to choose your own peace over his comfort, your willingness to walk away from anything that asks you to be less than who you truly are. Because when you are aligned, when you are whole, when you are sovereign, you become a force of nature. You become an unstoppable presence, a magnetic field, a frequency so powerful that it rearranges everything around it. And forces of nature don't chase. They don't beg or plead or convince. They simply exist in their power. They simply be. They stand in their truth and allow everything else to respond accordingly. And everything that's meant to be in their orbit finds its way there. Not through manipulation or strategy or carefully calculated moves, but through the natural law of resonance. Through the simple truth that like attracts like. Through the undeniable reality that when you become whole, you attract wholeness. So let this be your permission slip, beloved. Let this be the moment you stop waiting for someone else to give you permission to honor yourself. Permission to dislike the version of him that isn't showing up. Permission to be honest about the fact that the energy he's bringing is not matching the connection you know is possible. Permission to stop pretending that his half-hearted efforts are enough when you know they're not. Permission to be irritated by the patterns that aren't serving the connection. Permission to be frustrated by the same cycles repeating over and over. Permission to be exhausted by the emotional labor of holding space for someone who isn't holding space for you. Permission to be done with the excuses and the delays and the fear disguised as divine timing. Permission to stop accepting I'm not ready, or I need more time, or it's complicated as valid reasons to keep you in limbo. Permission to see through the spiritual justifications that are really just fear wearing a costume. Permission to want more, to expect more, to demand more. Not from a place of entitlement, as if he owes you something simply because you exist, but from a place of self-worth, from a deep knowing of what you deserve, from a clear understanding of what real love looks like, because you are not asking for too much. Despite what you may have been told, despite what you may have convinced yourself of in moments of doubt, you are not being unreasonable or demanding or expecting the impossible. You are simply no longer accepting too little. You are simply raising your standards to match your worth. You are simply refusing to settle for crumbs when you know you deserve the whole feast. And that shift, that recalibration, that sacred dislike of anything that dishonors your worth, that is the frequency that transforms everything. That is the turning point. That is the moment when everything begins to change. The masculine might not understand what's happening at first. He's been accustomed to your patience, your understanding, your willingness to wait. He's grown comfortable with the dynamic as it's been. He might interpret your distance as rejection, as punishment, as you giving up on him or the connection. He might feel confused by the shift in your energy, wondering why the woman who used to chase him is no longer chasing, why the woman who used to tolerate his inconsistency is no longer tolerating it. He might even get angry or defensive or pull away further, reacting from his own wounds, his own fears, his own unhealed patterns. Let him have his reaction. Let him feel whatever he needs to feel. Let him process this shift in whatever way he needs to process it, because his reaction is not your responsibility. You are not responsible for managing his emotions, for making this easier for him, for cushioning the blow of your boundaries. His journey is not your burden. You are not meant to carry him on your back while he figures out how to walk. You are not meant to sacrifice your own journey to make his more comfortable. His awakening is not your assignment. You are not his teacher, his therapist, his mother, or his savior. You are his mirror, and sometimes mirrors show us things we don't want to see. Your only assignment is to stay true to yourself, to honor your boundaries, even when they're uncomfortable, even when they create distance, even when they trigger his wounds or your own fears of abandonment. To protect your peace, to guard it like the precious resource it is, to refuse to let anyone or anything disturb the sacred sanctuary you've created within yourself, to choose your alignment over his comfort, to prioritize your own truth over his temporary ease, to understand that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is hold your ground. And when you do that, when you really do that, when you commit to it fully without wavering or second-guessing or going back on your boundaries, one of two things will happen. He will rise to meet you, stepping into the version of himself that matches the frequency you're holding, finally doing the work he's been avoiding, finally showing up in the way the connection requires. Or he will fall away, unable or unwilling to match your frequency, choosing to remain in his patterns rather than evolve beyond them, revealing that perhaps he was not your true divine counterpart after all, or that the timing is not aligned for your union in this lifetime. And either way, you will be free. This is the liberation you've been seeking, though perhaps not in the form you expected. Free from the exhaustion of carrying a connection alone, from being the only one holding the vision, the only one doing the work, the only one believing in what's possible. Free from the pain of loving someone who isn't ready to love you back fully. From giving your heart to someone who can only receive it partially. From offering your whole self to someone who can only show up halfway. Free from the cage of potential and into the reality of presence. No longer living in the future of what could be, but grounded in the present of what is. No longer imprisoned by possibility, but liberated by truth. This is not the end of your twin flame journey, beloved. Though it may feel like an ending, though it may look like you're walking away, though it may seem like you're giving up, this is actually the beginning. This is the beginning of the real journey, the journey that matters most. The journey where you stop abandoning yourself for love and start finding love within yourself. The journey where you stop betraying your own needs, your own truth, your own worth in the name of a connection, and start honoring yourself as the sacred being you are. The journey where you stop seeking union outside and start creating union inside, marrying your own masculine and feminine, integrating your own polarities, becoming whole within yourself. The journey where you stop waiting for him to complete you and start realizing you were never incomplete. Recognizing that the sense of incompleteness was an illusion, a wound, a false belief that you're now ready to release. And in that journey, in that transformation, in that sacred return to self, you become the woman you were always meant to be. You step into the fullness of your power, your truth, your divine feminine essence. The woman who doesn't need a twin flame to feel whole, who has found wholeness within herself and would only welcome a partner as an addition to her completeness, not as a solution to her emptiness. The woman who doesn't need union to feel complete, who has created union within herself and now experiences it as her natural state, rather than as something she's chasing outside herself. The woman who doesn't need anyone's validation to know her worth, who has validated herself, who has claimed her value independent of anyone else's recognition or acknowledgement. You become the woman who is the union. You embody it, you live it, you breathe it, you are it. And when you become that, when you embody that, when you live that, everything changes. The entire game shifts. The rules rewrite themselves. The journey transforms. And you finally understand that this was always the destination, that becoming whole within yourself was always the point, that the twin flame journey was never about finding another person, but about finding yourself. So tell me, beautiful soul, have you felt this shift? Have you noticed this dislike rising in you, this resistance to the old patterns, this refusal to accept less than you deserve? Share in the comments where you are in this stage. What has changed in you since you stopped chasing and started choosing yourself? Because your story, your truth, your experience, it might be exactly what another soul needs to hear today to give herself permission to do the same, to stop waiting and start living, to stop tolerating and start requiring, to stop abandoning herself and start coming home to the woman she's always been, the divine feminine, the sovereign queen, the woman who is the temple, the frequency, and the union itself.